In this video, we look at our major crop growing areas today and we ask, how will these change as our climates change, temperatures increase, and natural resources change? Hi and welcome, this is Brian. In part 3 of the Climate and Sustainable Food video series, we illustrate our current high production crop growing areas for our major grains, vegetables, legumes, fruits, and forage crops, and how our changing resources may impact these crop growing areas.
Welcome, Linda here. Will we be growing the same crops in the future?
Hello, Carla here. Will we have the needed natural habitats to support a large diversity of biodiversity and genetic resources?
Hi and welcome. Richard here. Do we have enough land to grow the needed grains, vegetables, legumes, fruits, and forage crops, plus land crucial for habitats, bioresources, greenhouse gas removal, and other land use needs?
At about the 3-minute mark, we illustrate the high production crop growing areas for various crops, including those in the Greenbelt, the Clay Belt, and Indigenous areas. Then, very important, at about 11 minutes, we illustrate the various resources that are changing along with the associated impacts on these respective crop growing areas. In part 1 of the series, we introduce several natural resources that are important for crop production. We describe how climate change is impacting these resources and in turn impacting crop production and yield. In part 2, we illustrate the eco-ingredients that help create our high production crop growing areas. These include solar radiation and the carbon cycle as part of photosynthesis, climate and temperature gradients, where crops that prefer warmer temperatures are found in the more southerly areas and vice versa, the multiple essential services that ecosystems, biodiversity, and genetic diversity provide, such as pollination services. Many crops prefer specific types of soil textures, and the importance of preserving prime agricultural land for food production.
Crop production is reported by county, region, and district. These areas are illustrated by the map boundaries displayed. The green-colored area includes both agricultural, forest, and urban areas. Higher production crop growing areas are typically found more in the southwest. Many of the crops are also grown nearer the lake in the eastern areas. With increasing urban growth, less crop production is carried out in the brownish-colored area. We use 2010 as a representative historical crop production period. Crop production rankings are based on dividing total annual crop production into 5 output levels. For example, if total production is 1,000 units, then the highest production blue-colored area would represent the 800 to 1,000 category.
We now look at the higher production areas for several of our major crops. We focus on high production crop growing areas. A business with 4 product lines may obtain 80% of their sales from only one of those product lines. If changes result in the loss of a major product line, then actions are needed.
60% of the grain corn produced was in the blue area, and 81% in the blue, dark green, and light green areas. Where else could we find a high production area for this crop? There has been a notable increase in corn yields and other crops in recent years to the present. There are many factors contributing to these yield increases.
The highest production areas for soybeans are towards the southwest.
The highest production areas for wheat are similarly toward the southwest. Wheat, both winter and spring wheat, represents the 3rd largest field crop production behind soybeans and corn.
In southern Ontario, the major canola growing areas are a bit farther north, where temperatures are a little cooler. Where else could we find a high production area for this crop? In northern Ontario, canola is grown in areas surrounding North Bay and West Nipissing.
For tomato production, 51% are grown in the blue area, and 78% are grown in the top 2 blue and green rankings, representing the warmer areas of southwestern Ontario, and various tomato processors are located in the surrounding areas.
Where else could we find a high production area for this crop?
A major potato growing area in central Ontario accounts for 40% of total production, and the combined top 3 areas account for 84%.
Where else could we find a high production area for this crop?
This is the Greenbelt in Ontario. a large area of protected land with many natural features including escarpment outcrops, watersheds, forests, various natural areas, a large moraine, and areas for crop production. The two specialty crop areas in the Greenbelt are the Holland Marsh north of Toronto and a portion of the Niagara Peninsula.
The Holland Marsh consists of rich organic soils where carrots, onions, lettuce, and some 20 vegetables are grown in total.
Darker organic soils absorb more heat compared to lighter soils, resulting in higher temperatures in the Holland Marsh than in surrounding areas for portions of the growing season.
This area represents the largest production of carrots not only in Ontario, but in all of Canada. Where else could we find a high production area for this crop? In addition to carrot growers in the Holland Marsh area, carrot processors are located in 3 additional areas in the southwest as illustrated.
The Holland Marsh also represents the largest production of onions in both Ontario and in all of Canada. In addition to the Holland Marsh, onions are also grown in smaller quantities in various areas across the southwest.
Sweet corn is grown in the more southerly areas. Examples of the higher production areas include Norfolk County, Essex County, and Chatham, Kent.
Red beets are grown for eating. Sugar beets are processed for white sugar. High production areas for both red beets and sugar beets are Lambton County and Chatham, Kent. Pumpkins are grown in various southern areas. One high production area is Norfolk County. Squash is grown in southern central areas.
These are examples of other non-legume vegetables typically grown in southern areas.
Legumes grow in pods and fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. In addition to soybeans, other legumes grown include green beans, green peas, and pulses. Processors for green beans and green peas are located in south-central locations and southwestern locations.
The only pulses grown in Ontario are dry beans, both white beans and colored beans. These are grown in the cooler central areas of southwestern Ontario. Across Canada, the prime growing area for various pulses, including dry beans, dry peas, lentils, and chickpeas, are in Western Canada, where temperatures are again cooler than in southern Ontario.
For dry beans, both white beans and colored beans, the high production areas are around the central portion of southwestern Ontario.
Where else could we find a high production area for this crop? Herbs and spices are typically grown in greenhouses here. One example of a recognized greenhouse operation is in central Ontario. Alternately, they are grown in areas having the climate and soils native to the respective crop. The Niagara Peninsula is a major fruit production area. The fruit growing area of the protected Greenbelt is located along the northern part of the Niagara Peninsula.
As an example of stone fruit production, 82% of all peaches are grown in the Niagara Peninsula, the blue shaded area on the right, with similarly high percentages for other stone fruit, along with various other types of fruit.
In addition to the Niagara area, peaches, pears, and other fruits are also grown in southwestern Ontario. Where else could we find a high production area for this crop?
Apples are grown in multiple areas, and in 2010 one of the higher production areas being a bit farther north.
Blueberries are grown in various areas. Norfolk County is one high production area. Other berries include strawberries, red raspberries, and black raspberries. The major grape and wine production areas are the Niagara region, Prince Edward County, Essex County, and Pelee Island.
Where else could we find a high production area for this crop?
There are various hay and grass forage and associated livestock operations located in more northern areas of the southwest, towards the east, and farther north. The Great Clay Belt extends across 2 northern ecoregions encompassing parts of Ontario and Quebec. As in the southwest, these predominantly clay areas were formed by the draining of much earlier glacial lakes, and the remaining sediments form these clay flatlands. The Great Clay Belt area has a very short growing season and unpredictable rainfall patterns. Along with pasture and livestock operations, wheat is one of the short-season crops grown in the northern clay belt. With climate change and increasing temperatures, the growing season is lengthening, perhaps as much as a week earlier in the spring and a week later in the fall compared to earlier decades. There is a renewed interest in understanding the future potential for producing more crops and livestock on these northern fertile soils.
The Indigenous people in Canada are also known as Aboriginal Canadians. In the more southern areas, they focus more on growing traditional crops. And in more northern areas, their diets are based more on fishing, hunting, trapping, and gathering. People living on these reserves also have a concern about how climate change will impact their wild species food production along with their traditional way of life.
This graph illustrates the hectares used for growing the major crops. The majority of farmland is used for growing soybeans and grain corn.
The various crop, livestock, poultry, and other operations supply lots of fresh foods to local food markets across Ontario. Many local food markets serve as popular tourist attractions. In addition, there are local food hubs where producers, buyers, and consumers are connected via virtual network sites. These food hubs re-establish farm-to-urban linkages, reduce the distance that food travels, and improves local access to fresh, healthy food.
We have illustrated our major high-production crop-growing areas for our key crops that we grow today. But our climates, temperatures, natural resources, and available land resources are changing. Greenhouse gas emissions from the combustion of fossil fuels for energy, industrial operations, and transportation are continuing to increase. In addition, there are greenhouse gas emissions from industrial processes, deforestation, and land use change. The major emissions from agricultural sources are methane from livestock operations and nitrous oxide from fertilizer application. Increasing greenhouse gas emissions result in increasing carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide remains in the atmosphere for a very long time. Heating will continue long after we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions.
How high will this graph go?
Our global temperatures are increasing significantly.
How high will this graph go?
Increasing atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations are scientifically linked to increasing global temperature, resulting in climate change. The left axis illustrates the gigatons of carbon dioxide emitted annually, which scientifically translates into the atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide, which translates into temperatures. The higher the concentrations of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the higher the temperatures. And these are typically mapped to 4 different representative concentration pathways for reporting and analysis purposes. For supporting data and more information, please refer to the following links. The graph on the left provides an illustration of representative current temperature gradients by ecoregion today, and on the right an illustration of potential higher temperatures in our major crop growing areas in the future. Temperatures above crop-specific limits results in heat stress for crops, especially during the reproductive stage. Yields are reduced. Climate change impacts direct climatic parameters, including temperature, precipitation, and wind. Climate change also impacts indirect climate parameters including humidity, evapotranspiration, vapor pressure deficit, dew point, among others. Increasing temperatures influence thermal units and the length of the growing season. With increasing temperatures, there are an increased number of extreme weather events, an increased number of pest and disease outbreaks, and an increased food loss over the value chain. Climate change is impacting various ecosystem services, including the water cycle, soil microbial processes, nutrient cycling, biodiversity, and pollination, all essential for food production.
Climate change, land use change, and pollution are all causing biodiversity loss. A loss of pollinators and a loss of insects in general has major consequences for entire ecosystems, including agroecosystems. Earlier in this video, we observed that the higher production areas for the canola oil crop are in the more northerly and cooler areas. For vegetables, we observed that potatoes prefer cooler temperatures, while tomatoes prefer warmer temperatures, and neither can tolerate temperatures that are too hot. We also observed that pulses prefer the more northerly and cooler areas.
The reference scientific study projects that in 60 years, the southern part of Ontario will experience temperatures similar to those much farther south today, implicating today's high production warm crop and cool crop growing areas.
How much will our climates shift?
Recent reports indicate that some 70 hectares or 175 acres of farmland are lost every day to urban sprawl and related non-agriculture uses.
As in many areas around the globe, urban development in this area continues to be carried out on prime agricultural lands. Prime agricultural lands need to be preserved for food production, habitats, biodiversity, bioresources, greenhouse gas removal, and other related essential land use needs.
Where else will we grow our crops as our climate, natural resources, and land resources change? What crops will we be growing?
Which crops will see their high production crop growing areas change the most?
Crop modeling tools integrated with big data and data analytics can simultaneously simulate several direct and indirect climatic parameters, various soil parameters, farm management practices, economic conditions, and future scenarios to help project future crop yields. In upcoming videos, we cover more on the carbon cycle, carbon dioxide concentrations, climate change, and increasing temperatures, and the impact of these on crop production. Globally, we need to achieve net zero emissions or near zero emissions soon. The more we do sooner, the better it will be later.
Agriculture has a big opportunity to both reduce greenhouse gas emissions and generate revenue by sequestering carbon into soils.
Now, investment managers, asset managers, investors, financiers, and shareholders are promoting sustainable operations. International goals include actions to mitigate climate change, limit global temperature increases, and transition to a low-carbon future. Reporting on and meeting various sustainability goals are mandatory requirements today for many investing and financing operations. This video series would not be possible without all the amazing open source tools and open data. Data that is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Please pause the video to review the various tool developers, organizations, and sources of knowledge that help to make this video possible. Thanks. A big thanks to everyone who helped and provided input to this video. Thanks very much for watching. I hope that you have learned from this video. You may subscribe. See you in the next video.